As many of you know, if you hang a GPS off of the factory cross brace on your windshield frame, there's a very good chance that you're going to break the welds in here. So we've made a brace and is going to keep the welds from breaking on that. This is a bit of a tough shot to get. The brace goes between these two holes and the top here. These holes are actually underneath your gauge cluster, which is going to make it a little bit tough to shoot this video. Yeah, you can see what you're dealing with here. And we're going to take the bolts and we're going to put them in from the back side, and then we're going to put a nut on them. So we'll have two studs sticking out here, and that way we can remove this brace without having to mess with these, because they're a bit of a pain to get in. So the first thing we're going to do, there's some rubber boots here that go over top of the LED lights. There's one on both sides, and they make it really difficult to get the bolts through the back side. So we're going to take these off, and I'm just going to grab it and give it a pull. Sorry, I know my hand is in the way. And just work it off. And this is one of the boots here. Notice there's a triangle here, an arrow pointing up, and that's the way that it came off the bike, that was straight up. And you can do it by hand if you need to grab a pair of pliers to get a good grip on this rubber. That's okay too. Just make sure you don't tear it. If you work the bars back and forth, you can get a little more room to work. And again, this guy's got the arrow right here, so that's going to be pointing up. So in your kit, there's a hardware bag. There's two M8 by 16 hex bolts, and those are the ones that are going to come through the back side of this bracket. There's four of these Allen head M16s as well. Two regular nuts, two nylock nuts, and then there's two pieces of clear hose that are split. These are a bit of a hassle to get in, so you want to make sure that you start with a clean shop floor, but you'll probably drop these a couple of times getting them in. So you can see the limited amount of space between here and here. So trying to get the 16 mil bolt in is a bit of a challenge, and if you get it in one shot, well done. Oh. All right, so 2 attempts on that one, and it's in. Gonna put the non-nylock, just the regular nut on here. So one finger on the back side. So you can see that I just started the nut. We're gonna put a little bit of blue Loctite on the bolt before we tighten the nut up. So if my hand is in there, it will focus. I'm going to absolutely drop the camera. I'm trying to do this so you guys can see getting the bolt in. And I'm trying to do this blind, looking into the viewfinder of the camera, because if I stick my head in here, then you won't be able to see. Oh, there we go. Oh. Okay, attempt one. Kind of like shaving in a mirror. I'm kind of moving opposite of how I think I need to be. Two. So the reason I did it this way, rather than trying to hold a nut on the backside, the nut may be easier the other direction. The problem is the center tube, maybe that it's round and all. I get it. There we go. All right. This center tube here is round, and when the bracket sits across it, it rocks back and forth. So the standard nuts that go on these bolts actually levels everything out. And like I said, we have studs when we're done, and then you can remove the brace without having to do all these steps again. And then we're just going to start this nut on the bolt. And like I said, I'm going to crash, drop my phone, smash the bits. The nut started here. I don't want the bolts to fall out when I go over to grab the Loctite. Because these are regular nuts, I'm going to put a little bit of Loctite on them. The reason these are regular instead of Nylox is the 16 mil long bolts are already a pain to get in here. If we put 20s in, it would be a real bear. It would just be awful to do. So we kept them 16, which is the shortest length that we can possibly use, and still get everything stacked on there. And it lets us use a Nylock on the outside. So these guys are the regular nuts plus blue Loctite. A socket on the front side and a wrench on the back side, both 10 mil. And it's going to be easiest to get these started by hand. Finger on the bolt and then spin that nut in. Sorry, the light is terrible and the focus is terrible on this side. I'll get it in focus on the other side. And then with your ratchet, sometimes these bite, sometimes these nuts bite, and you don't need to back them up with the wrench like this one, which is perfect. So you can see the bolt sticking out there with the nut on it, and it's got the blue Loctite. So even with the brace off, those are going to stay in. And we'll try and get a better angle on the other side. I'm just going to put my finger on the back side of the bolt and get that guy started with the other finger. Like so. And then again with the socket on here. And that one looks like it's going to bite too, so I don't need to put the wrench on the back side of it. And that's it. So I got the two studs sticking out there, and that's perfect. With that done, we can go ahead and put these donuts back on. Again, arrow to the top. Once this step is done with the studs in and the donuts back on, that's the hardest part of the install. So that's complete. We've got the two studs sticking out, and we've got the rubber boots back on the LED lights. So we're going to take our bracket and we're going to set the half moons of the clamps onto the tube, and then we're going to come down to the bottom and wiggle it so we get the studs through the holes, and then we're going to put our Nylocks on. We don't need to tighten these up right now. We're just going to get them started so the bottom doesn't pop off when we're getting the top in place. Just like that. So this guy has some room to move. So there are a couple of small pieces of split tubing. They're going to go on the factory Honda bar. We're just going to wiggle the tubing underneath the clamps. So we put the tubing in here for a couple of reasons. The locations where we're clamping to is in the corner of the tube. And because it's not a mandrel bend, that tube isn't round anymore. It's a little bit squished. So if we go to clamp onto the regular tube, they don't fit great. The other reason we put them in is we don't want to scratch the powder coat up on this factory piece. With the Allen head bolts, 2 per. We're going to leave these guys a little bit loose. We just want to make sure that we have this centered before we tighten everything up. And we're just going to come down and look at the gap between the upright here and our clamp. We're about 1/8 inch too far this way. So we're just going to give it a little bit of a wiggle over. And that's pretty close, just a little bit more. And that's on the money there. And then we can come back and snug these up. And then from there we can just come in with our ratchet and tighten these bolts up on the bottom. And you can see the 16 mil bolts are just long enough to come through the nylock. So a couple of tips when you do the install. When you put the clear sections of hose on top of the Honda crossbar here, if you put a dab of silicone on them before you clamp them down, they'll be stuck to this tube. So if you do want to take this bar off, you don't have to worry about dropping these or repositioning them. They're going to be in the same spot. And you're going to want to put a little bit of lubricating oil on these bolts before you put them into the clamps. Just makes them go together a little bit smoother. Once we have the brace mounted, we can put the windshield back on. Now that we've got our windscreen back on the bike, we're going to mount a ram ball. You're going to mount your GPS however you normally did with the stock Honda crossbar. You're just going to mount it to our bar now. This is the way that I generally do them though. This is the ram ball with the U-bolt. You're not just limited to mounting stuff on the top. There's a lot of room on the sides here too that you can mount other things. Not that I suggest you load it up with stuff. It's certainly strong enough to hold a bunch of things, but yeah, you got tons of room to get everything you could ever want mounted. Everything's nice and strong. It's not going anywhere over the corrugated roads. There's no issues with strength. So that wraps up the install video for the Camel windshield brace for the 2016-2017 Honda Africa Twin. If you have any questions, you can get a hold of us, info@cameltank.com. Thanks for watching.